Welcome to Founder Stories. I'm Mike Abbott. With me today is Nate Blecharczyk from Airbnb. Welcome, Nate.
Thank you, Mike.
It's good to have you. Well, first tell us a little bit about Airbnb.
Sure. Airbnb, we've made it just as easy to book someone's home as a hotel. And today on our open marketplace, we have 300,000 properties around the world, 192 countries, 35,000 different cities. Why we've been so successful is we're ultimately providing an experience. And it's not just the roof over your head, but it's meeting the host and it's being exposed to a different neighborhood that makes you feel like you're really in San Francisco.
And give us a sense of size. Like, how big is the company?
Well, there's different ways to look at this, but we have 60 engineers today. We have about 220 people in San Francisco, and then a few hundred more abroad doing customer support and other functions.
Okay. We'll come back to the size here in a bit. One of the things that's striking to me about the company that we were just talking about is, your co-founders, Joe and Brian, are designers,
Yeah.
and you're an engineer. And a lot of times startups have either missing one of those or they hire that later. I'd love to hear from you, like, what have you found to be like the pros and cons of having that kind of match from the beginning?
Yeah, I know, it's pretty unusual, and I actually attribute a lot of our success to that combination. Listen, we see things very differently because of our backgrounds, and we've discovered that's an asset. Sometimes it takes a little longer to reconcile our perspectives, but what we found is if we take the time to do that, we can come up with a superior solution, one that takes into account both points of view. And when we've scaled the team, we've really looked for people from both those perspectives and try to create an environment where people can kind of come together to collaborate and basically recreate this founder DNA that's been so successful.
Have you seen like any challenges though, or at some point you kind of have to break ties? And design obviously wants to push the envelope on the experience. Engineering wants to deliver on that, but also make sure it runs.
Yeah.
Have you run into those challenges?
Well, I think when we approach problems, we start with the and versus the or. It's very easy to jump to immediately doing the trade-off discussion, but we really try to first understand both perspectives fully and really challenge ourselves to how can we do both things. And then ultimately, sometimes you do have to make a little bit of a trade-off, but not before we fully explore the options. I think too many times you see people shortcutting the solution. That's a very kind of engineering mindset to just kind of shortcut the process for speed. And there's a time and place for that, but you don't want to miss out on the creativity too. I attribute a lot of our success to that. The three founders, I think if any one of us weren't a part of this company, we wouldn't have gotten as far.
So you're at 60 today in engineering, and I remember when we first met about a year and a half ago, it was like 10.
Yeah.
So you have a lot of growth. Tell us a little bit about that, like what you've kind of learned in that type of growth, just on the engineering side, and even as a company in that time frame.
Yeah, well, we've always been very cautious with our hiring, not just because we're looking for exceptionally talented engineers, but also because culture is so important to us. And so that's a difficult intersection of people. And so as a result, even though we've been doing a lot of business for a long time, and today the numbers are so huge, and 60 is not nearly enough to support that, we've always been a little bit behind the curve in the hiring. But the benefit of that has been that each person who comes in has a lot of impact. And when you have fewer people taking a lot of responsibility, you get more consistency, and you have more efficiency, right? Because the bigger the team gets, sometimes there's more overhead as well. So right now we're still in this sweet spot of having a really big problem, and yet people are still taking individual ownerships for parts of the product. So those 60 people are split between 17 different working groups. And so each team has anywhere from like 1 to 3 people. So there's still real kind of accountability and really good ownership of what's being built.
I'd be curious to hear, with that, designer engineers, like the founders of the company, like how do the products and services get built? At Airbnb?
Yeah. Well, we have this concept of one product team, and it's composed of the engineers and the designers and some of the product managers. And so depending on what part of the product we're working on, you'll have some combination of these people involved from start to finish, which I think is an important distinction. It's not that design or product kind of comes up with a spec and throws it over the wall. It's a collaborative process that starts with all 3 parties involved and ends with all 3 parties involved. And they all work in the same space. So there's one giant room, and you have designers sitting next to engineers, and regardless of what team you're on, the teams might be mixed up too. So we really try to stress that there are no silos.
Interesting. So as you kind of grew from 10 to 60 in the company, like as large grew that quickly, what kind of tools did you build, or I mean, like reflecting back on that, what would you do differently, or what worked to be and share with our audience?
Yeah. I think the way you build product certainly changes over time. I think initially you're optimizing for like product market fit and just figuring out what's going to stick. And so you want to move really fast. That's what you're optimizing for. Later on in a company's life, you're optimizing for scale. You figured it out and you need to scale it. And that's a different kind of engineering and maybe product structure. We're kind of in this interesting place in the middle, right, where we've definitely found fit and we are transitioning to more scale. I think one of the things that have benefited us is by having a smaller team earlier on. I mean, actually, I was the only engineer for 1 year after we launched the product. And so a lot of the core functionality I built, and it's built very consistently. And although it was built fast, it was also built in a very modular way, right? And so what we've done over time is we've basically replaced certain vertical components like search and turned it into a separate service, and maybe it's in Java. That's one example. Another thing we've had to do is create a better deploy process, because you have more and more people pushing code. We let our engineers push at any point throughout the day. And so you got 60 people pushing code. And we've had to make sure that there aren't collisions when code's going out. It takes a while to update all the machines. You need a safety net with the testing. And then you need really good instrumentation of metrics to know, okay, I just pushed some code. Did that change any of the performance metrics or business metrics? So there's a lot of tooling around that so that we can continue to push just as we did 2 years ago.
Keep that same pace, but do it a little more confidently.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the things that you've done and the company's done, which I think has been really effective, is setting up these tech talks.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about like what drove you to go create those, and what have you kind of learned from those?
Yeah, well, it's obvious that there's a really passionate community here, right? I mean, there's just so many people involved in this. So there's no doubt that there's an audience for this. I think what we've really tried to do is differentiate our tech talks, because I think there are a lot of tech talks out there. It's not a new idea. So what has made our tech talks so popular? I think it's the same thing that makes our product so popular or anything else. Is we don't just think about providing the utility, but we think about the full experience of this, right? And so when you come over for one of our tech talks, we have Chef Sam and his team making original creations for people. There's sometimes mood lighting. There's a whole vibe going on that I think people really enjoy, because everyone's time is precious, right? And so it's not just about providing the content of the meeting, which we have a high bar for, but it's also making sure it's fun for people to network, et cetera.
Yeah, it seems like they've worked really well. I'm sure good for recruiting too.
Yeah, I mean, it's so popular. So we do the engineering ones every 2 weeks, and then we actually now have design ones every other week too, like on the off weeks. And the data team wants to have their own series, so we're trying to find a new night for them.
Weekends.
Yeah.
So recently I read that you brought on a VP of engineering.
Yeah, Mike Curtis.
And I'd love to hear about, for you, as that you were the solo engineer for a year, and you've been there as the team has grown. Now you brought someone in. How's that transition, bringing someone in and kind of delegating a lot of these things that you've historically done to someone else? Yeah,
it's gone really smoothly, and it's been an awesome experience. Finding Mike was a long process. It took over a year. It's painful to have an open rec for that long and to have to do that many interviews. But I have to say, it was worth taking that time to find the perfect person for us. Mike's just been full of energy. He's been like a perfect fit with the other leaders in the company. The team has been like incredibly jazzed about having him here. And what's great is that Mike has seen a team operate at a different scale. So there's Facebook scale, where he led the growth team there, which is a team of about 60 or 75 right now. And he's also been at Yahoo before that with a team of like 200. So he's seen different life cycles, and from that he has a good sense for where we need to go, while still being excited to be kind of at the stage we're at, which is maybe a lot more agile.
What kind of advice though can you give to another technical founder who, he or she brings in that leader, and you've seen work?
Yeah,
because that it's great that after a year you found him, and it sounds like that's going well. But Yeah, sometimes it doesn't always work out. So I'd love to, what kind of counsel can you provide?
Yeah, well, because I met with so many people, we had to get really organized about how do we compare, 50 candidates, right? And so we spent a lot of time really writing out the spec and getting alignment amongst those who are part of the process, and really thinking about, how do we probe this one aspect of the criteria. So I'd be just really thoughtful about that. Take the time to do that. Just don't do a bunch of interviews or meet and greets. I would say don't settle. I mean, this person is a permanent member and is responsible for one of your most important assets, which is the engineering team. You want to take the time, and even if it takes an extra year, that's fine. I would say spend a lot of one-on-one time too, right? Go through your current problems, see how they think about it. Make sure that this is someone you're going to have a blast working with every day. And then, look where they come from. What was the culture like there? Do you think that's an organization where you can learn some stuff from? Because at the end of the day, you're hiring this person because they've seen some things, right? Like they have more experience. Well, where did they get that experience from? Is it from a place where you think there's a lot of overlap with whom you want to become, or not?
Well, Nate, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for coming over today. And thank you all for watching Founder Stories.